For nearly a decade, one question had followed Can Yaman wherever he went, whispered by fans, asked by journalists, and echoed in every comment section: why did it really end? But for 8 long years, he never answered. Not a single word. He smiled when they asked, he changed the topic when pushed, and he carried that silence like a shield. Until now. The man who once lived under the brightest lights of fame had built a fortress around his heart. Behind the cameras, he had his struggles. Sleepless nights, empty rooms, and a loneliness that no amount of success could fill. He worked endlessly, traveled the world, smiled for photos, but deep down, something was missing. The people closest to him say that even in the middle of a crowded room, he often looked elsewhere, lost in thoughts he never shared. That silence began the night everything fell apart. It wasn't just the end of a relationship, it was the collapse of something much bigger. Trust, hope, and belief in love itself. For years, he avoided interviews that touched on the subject. Directors, co-stars, even friends knew that there were boundaries not to be crossed. But something changed recently. Perhaps time finally did what it always promises: heal what seemed impossible to fix. Or perhaps it was because of one particular moment that forced him to face the past once again. A letter. A memory. A face he thought he'd never see again. When he sat down for the interview that would shake the entire world, no one expected what was about to happen. Cameras were rolling, the host was calm, but there was a heaviness in the air. Can's hands were steady, his posture perfect, yet his eyes betrayed everything, years of buried emotion rising to the surface. When the question finally came, "Do you regret anything about the past?" He took a deep breath. And for the first time in 8 years, he didn't smile or dodge. He looked down, nodded slightly, and said quietly, "Yes. I regret the silence." That one sentence sent chills through everyone watching. But it didn't end there. As the cameras kept rolling, he continued, his voice trembling just enough to betray the truth behind his calm exterior. "I thought I was protecting myself. I thought moving on meant forgetting. But I was wrong." The host tried to ask more, but he stopped her gently. He leaned back, exhaled, and added words no one expected to hear. "What hurts most is not what happened, it's what I never said." And with that, the world understood, the man who had once chosen silence was finally ready to speak. The interviewer didn't move for several seconds. The silence in the studio was heavy, the kind of silence that fills a room when something raw and real finally surfaces. Can Yaman, who had always been known for his control, looked different. His eyes glistened under the studio lights, his jaw tightened, and the world saw something they had never seen from him before: vulnerability. He took a deep breath, adjusted the microphone, and said quietly, "There are stories people think they know, and then there's the truth I've kept inside for 8 years." Everyone leaned forward, producers, cameramen, even the host, who forgot her next line. Can's voice trembled slightly, not from fear, but from the weight of what he was finally about to release. "I made mistakes," he admitted. "I pushed away someone who didn't deserve to be hurt. And the worst part is, I did it thinking it was for the best." Those words alone would have been enough to break the internet, but he continued. He looked away for a moment, as if searching for courage in the lights above him, then said, "When you love someone but you're too proud, too angry, or too scared to say it, that's not love anymore. That's ego disguised as strength." The host didn't interrupt. She knew something historic was happening. Viewers around the world were glued to their screens, watching the man who had spent years hiding behind a perfect image finally allow it to crack. Then came the moment that froze time. Can lowered his voice, almost whispering, "She was the best thing that ever happened to me. And I let her go." The room fell completely silent. Even the cameras seemed to pause. He continued, voice breaking slightly, "I told myself I was doing the right thing, that my career needed space, that love could wait. But it doesn't wait. You can't schedule emotions. When you walk away from something real, you don't move on, you just carry the emptiness differently." It wasn't just an admission of regret. It was an emotional collapse that the world had been waiting for without knowing it. For years, people had speculated, theorized, accused, and romanticized. And now, the truth was being spoken, not through headlines, not through gossip, but straight from his heart. The host, visibly moved, asked softly, "Do you think she knows how you feel now?" Can looked straight into the camera, his eyes steady yet filled with pain. "If she's watching," he said slowly, "then I hope she finally hears me, because I didn't have the courage to tell her back then." When the segment ended, there was no applause, no music, no fade out. Just silence, the same kind of silence that had followed him for 8 years, but this time, it felt different. It wasn't hiding anymore. It was release. After that interview aired, the world exploded. Social media went into chaos, tabloids flooded with theories, and fans around the globe dissected every word, every pause, every expression. Who was she? Became the biggest question of the year. People replayed the clip in slow motion, analyzing the way his eyes flickered, the tone in his voice, even the direction he looked when he said, "I let her go." But for Can, the real storm wasn't outside, it was inside. Once he had spoken those words, something shifted. The silence that had protected him for 8 years began to crumble, and with it came memories he had buried so deep, he thought they were gone forever. There were moments from that old love that haunted him in flashes, a hand brushing his arm during a late-night walk, laughter echoing through an empty set, whispered promises made under hotel lights. She had been the one person who truly saw him, not the actor, not the fame, but the man underneath it all. And that was exactly what made losing her unbearable. After the breakup, he had convinced himself that it was for the best. He had told everyone, and himself, that love was a distraction. That success needed focus, and that emotions were dangerous for someone in his position. But deep down, he knew it wasn't true. The truth was, he had been afraid. Afraid of vulnerability, afraid of dependence, afraid that being open would make him weak in a world that demanded strength. In those early years of silence, he threw himself into work. New projects, new cities, new faces, but no matter how far he went, her presence followed him. It was in the songs he heard late at night, in the scent of the coffee she used to make, in the words he wanted to say but never did. Friends say that sometimes, in quiet moments, he would drift off and stare into space, completely lost. One of them once asked, "Do you ever think about calling her?" Ken had smiled bitterly and replied, "Every day." But what would I say after 8 years of silence? That question became his torment. Because time had passed, people had changed, and yet one thing remained the same, the regret that burned every time he thought of her name. When the interview ended and the camera stopped rolling, he didn't go out, didn't talk, didn't celebrate. He sat alone in his apartment for hours, staring at his phone. It was 3 a.m. When he finally opened his old messages, conversations from years ago, full of warmth, laughter, and life. The last one she had sent him read, "One day, I hope you realize that silence can also break a heart." And that night, as he read it over and over, he whispered to himself, "I realize it now." That sleepless night changed everything. The man who had spent years hiding behind fame finally sat in front of his phone, scrolling through her name. A name he hadn't dared to touch for 8 long years. His fingers hovered over the screen, trembling slightly, as if the weight of all those lost years pressed against them. One message. That was all it would take. But he couldn't bring himself to write it. Not yet. Outside, Rome was quiet. The city slept, but his mind wouldn't stop. Every part of him wanted to reach out, to say something, anything. He even typed a few words, "I saw something today that reminded me of you." Then deleted them. Then tried again, "I hope you're doing well." Delete. Again. "I never stopped thinking about you." Delete. Over and over. The truth was, no sentence felt worthy enough to bridge 8 years of silence. He got up, poured himself a drink, and sat by the window, looking down at the empty streets. That's when his thoughts drifted back to the last night they had spoken. It hadn't ended in anger. There were no screams, no accusations, just quiet heartbreak. She had looked at him with eyes full of disappointment and said, "You're already leaving, even while you're standing here." And he had nothing to say, because she was right. In his world, love had become a luxury he couldn't afford. At least, that's what he told himself to survive. But years later, with all the fame and success he could ever want, he still found himself alone in the dark, missing the simplicity of her laughter. He picked up the phone again, this time opening the Notes app instead of the message box. He began to write, not to send, but to finally say what had lived inside him for so long. "You were right. I thought walking away would protect us, but it only destroyed what we had. I told myself that silence meant strength, but all it really meant was fear. You were my calm, my chaos, my reminder of what it meant to feel alive. And I ruined it." He paused, breathing deeply, then added one final line. "If I could go back, I'd choose you, every single time." He stared at those words until dawn. The sun began to rise, its light spilling softly across the floor. And for the first time in years, he didn't feel like an actor rehearsing lines. He felt human, painfully, beautifully human. He didn't send the message that morning. But he didn't delete it either. He saved it, quietly, under a folder titled "Things I Should Have Said." What he didn't know was that destiny wasn't done with him yet. Because sometimes, what you keep hidden finds its way back, not through a phone, but through fate itself. Weeks passed after that sleepless night. The confession had gone viral, yet Can didn't care about the headlines or the chaos it caused. Something had shifted inside him. The silence that had once protected him now felt unbearable. Every interview, every camera flash, every scripted smile reminded him of what he'd lost, and what he had never said. Then one evening, fate decided it was time. He was in Istanbul for a short film appearance, something he almost turned down. After the event, while walking through the hotel lobby, he saw her, the woman he had carried in his memory for 8 years. She was standing near the entrance, talking to someone, her expression calm, graceful, just as he remembered. For a moment, the noise of the room faded. It was as if time itself stopped. He froze, unable to breathe. His heart pounded like it hadn't in years. And then she turned. Their eyes met, just for a second, and everything he'd buried came rushing back, the laughter, the pain, the warmth, the goodbye. She hesitated, recognizing him instantly. The air between them was heavy, charged with everything that had been left unsaid. He took a few steps forward, but before he could speak, someone called her name. She smiled politely, nodded at him once, that same soft, distant smile, and started to walk away. It felt like watching destiny slip through his fingers all over again. But this time, he couldn't let it happen. He moved quickly, gently touched her arm, and said her name out loud for the first time in 8 years. She stopped. Slowly, she turned back toward him. And in that moment, without cameras, without scripts, he said the words he had written but never sent. "I was wrong. About everything. I thought silence would save me, but it destroyed me. You were never the mistake, letting you go was." She didn't answer right away. Her eyes filled with tears, and for a moment, it was like they were back where it all began, 2 people, stripped of fame and fear, standing in the truth. Finally, she whispered, "You took 8 years to say that." He nodded, his voice breaking. "I know. But I've been saying it in my heart every day." There was no dramatic ending, no kiss, no music. Just 2 souls finally releasing the weight of what had been haunting them. She smiled faintly, touched his hand, and said softly, "Maybe now, we can both be free." When she walked away, he didn't stop her this time. He just stood there, watching her disappear into the night, peaceful, complete, finally honest with himself. The next morning, he posted one last message on his social media: "Silence can protect you from the world, but it can also cost you the one person who made it worth living." The world reacted instantly, thousands of comments, millions of views. But for the first time in 8 years, Can didn't care who was watching. Because this time, his confession wasn't for them. It was for her. And for the man he finally allowed himself to be.